Yes.
Hey, what's going on, everybody out there in the wonderful, wonderful world of the internet? Guys, my name is Duncan, and I am joined here by Chris from AMD. Chris, say hello.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
So today, guys, we've been discussing a lot of things about the differences of Intel's chip with AMD's, and we finally got a chance to sit down with one of the officials that have had work. You worked on the chip, correct?
Yeah.
So we're actually getting a chance to sit down and talk to him about the different things. Now, this is open, guys, and I will pick different kind of people discussing and asking the questions. So if you have any questions for Chris, please feel free. We're going to just kind of go over what the Threadripper is and kind of discuss, you know, I guess more or less, Chris, is like more discusses like more about the Threadripper. I mean, like I want to say a bunch of information, but I'm always going like, you know, that's the guest point. So I will let you introduce yourself and discuss the Threadripper to kind of open it up.
Sure. First off, hi, I'm Chris from AMD. I have been working there for quite a while at this point. So we're here to talk about, oh, and I'm a field application engineer. So I actually am the engineer who goes out and helps the customers now. So I'm the one who goes out and you know, works with people who are having problems, mostly system integrators like you guys, and Main Gear, and you know, those sorts of customers. That's what I do. Anyway. So we're talking about Threadripper. Threadripper is our latest and greatest top-of-the-line processor. I am a huge fan. You know, regardless of whether I worked there, I would own one. 16-core, 32-thread, 3.3 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz boost. At the top end, that's the 1950X. Below that, the 1920X. It's 12 cores, 24 thread. I don't know. Anyone have any questions or anything? I didn't talk about this all day, so I don't know how much we want. You know,
no, it's okay, Chris. Trust me. I mean, I'm one of those people where it's like we can carry a discussion between each other, and if people have something prevalent, we'll just say something. So let's just start. How did the Threadripper come to be with like it's because like you guys have had quite a few years. Like I originally was using an 81. I want to say 8350 before I made the switch over to a Ryzen chip. And I've always been an AMD supporter. And no, I'm not going to be biased and say that I'm against Intel, so don't take that way. I'm just basically clear out stating to you guys that more or less that I did it because I was always a kid who was trying to make computers, and AMD was in my budget range for a 14-year-old. But it's always served me well, and I think that's what came down to was the decision of when I was going to think about getting a Kaby Lake. Somebody said, oh no, well, they're going to release the Ryzen, and I waited for it and actually had viewers help me raise the money to buy it, so I put the system together, and it's been working for me flawlessly. And was this like, when you guys built the Ryzen, I guess the question would be is, did you guys already have in mind to build the Threadripper, or was that the first part and then the Ryzen came? Like, I guess the chicken and the egg scenario.
Yeah, so, you know, when you look at the product stack, you have the Ryzen processors, and then you have, on the other side of that, the EPYC processors. And so essentially what we do is we make a single die, and I guess most people know this, right? The die has 8 cores. So on a single die, you just have a high-end Ryzen. So, you know, an 8-core Ryzen is a single die solution. And then we have these 2-core, you know, Threadrippers, and then the 4-core EPYCs. So the initial, you know, that I know of course, I'm sure there's people above my pay grade who maybe knew more than I did at the time. But, you know, EPYC was definitely always in the product stack, and Ryzen was always in the product stack. And then Threadripper was almost like the best kept secret at AMD for a long time. There were people who, you know, normally are in the know on everything who didn't even know it was coming out. But when you look at the stack, it makes sense, right? Because you know, it's just kind of half an EPYC, you know, as far as die solutions go. So.
Okay, so when like, how do you guys usually get the ideas for these new chips? Like, is it just constant research, and then when you guys feel like you hit a point, you're like, okay, this feels stable, or do you guys like have a process on a board team saying like, what happens if we did this or used it that way?
Honestly, so this is normally a question, I guess, for product management, as I'm generally in engineering. But how
Oh,
I what I know of it is that I mean, this is planned well in advance of like what ends up working and that sort of thing. We have whole teams who are researching what we think people actually want, what we think people actually need, and I think with Threadripper in general, we saw an opening there. There always was this higher end market we'd never really been in, or hadn't been in a while, I guess I should say. And we had the product to do it, on essentially. So there was no reason that we shouldn't have went for it. You know, if that makes sense.
no, it makes complete sense of like how that gets put together. I've always wondered with everything like how you would like come together with like, hey, we want to do this because like you guys are always inventing new things here. Like it's not a simple process where you're like, we're gonna make a new processor. Let's cram two more into it. Like, I mean, I wish life was that easy because then I could actually build them, but that's not that easy. So, but when you guys came with the Threadripper, did you guys have in mind that you were going to make it for like streamers and heavy end graphic users, or were you guys just like, hey, how can we improve our chip? Like, because I mean, it's a lot. Like I guess more or less, I don't really fully understand of how you guys always come up with these great ideas. Like, it's always really cool because there's always something new and that we don't think of that you guys come up with.
So a lot of it's listening to customers and listening to y'all. I'm here in Texas. Um, what we're doing is we're looking at what you guys need and what you guys are doing, and then saying how can we make that experience better. Um, Threadripper, it was aimed towards Twitchers and streamers and these people who are doing, you know, it used to be that you'd have workstations for these high end guys who are doing graphics work and that sort of stuff, and then you'd have gaming machines. And my brother-in-law is a great example because he keeps one of each, right? One for his work and one for his play. But we're kind of noticing that nowadays it's the same person, right? I mean, whether you want to believe you're doing high end work or you're just like streaming a game, I mean, that is doing visual, editing and visual work. And so we're starting to follow what the trends are. We're not making it up. We're doing what you guys want to do, right?
Yeah. And see, and that's the thing is that like, um, I always like the creative process behind it. I always wondered like, how much these people are actually, going out and actually, talking to us or not. Because I mean, like sometimes companies will make decisions not really based off their customer base. They'll be like, oh, we feel this is the right move. But you guys have always seemed really responsive. And like with Ryzen being released, you guys have made quite the big splash and shook everything up. I mean, like even like right now as we stand, we talk about Vega, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, well the Vega is definitely competitor for a 1080, but not a 1080 Ti. I'm just like, yeah, but you guys released the 1080 and then you released the Ti, so how do you know they won't have like a Vega and then something as close to where that is? Because I mean, I think even with your guys' Vega, you guys are actually outperforming the 1080 just with your card. A lot of people have been really ecstatic about that too because it measures in so well with the price of what like you have the Ti and then you have the Vega, and the Vega is coming at a better pricing for more acceptable use for people. Like it just seems with like everything you guys have been doing lately, you've been just pretty much just making waves. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of it through the news and like reading and following between the two. Now, with the response that like Intel has with their stuff and like making theirs, do you guys ever like? I mean, because I don't feel like you guys really compete. I feel like you guys just make products and then it just happens.
I actually heard a quote, and I think it was from Lisa, but I hope I don't get in trouble if it's not. It was one of those people, and they said that we're a company of engineers, and we make cool stuff and then hope it sells. I mean, we're gonna figure out what the need is and what customers want, and then we're gonna attempt to make the coolest thing we can, um, and that's what we do. And as someone who's on the engineering end and who is actually in there and in the labs every day, I can tell you that that's all we are attempting to do is make a great product. Um, and I do believe, we mentioned Vega. Vega 64 performs very well against a 1080. I do run the numbers. That is part of my job is to run benchmarks all day and all night. I'm literally running benchmarks behind me right now.
I see those are very fine computers. Who are they made? No, I'm just kidding.
Me.
Oh. I was like, because I was looking at the cases, but I was like, oh yeah, the cases. They look like one of our Syber PC stuff. That's what I was going like, oh wait, those are cases? I'm like, no.
I don't know. The cases might be actually, because I just kind of use whatever cases we have around from old things. But
Yeah.
no, I put those together. Those were kind of pre-release parts and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's I'm actually running the benchmarks behind us right now on the Vega 64, and I can say that we're running comparable. It's always one of those games where people go, "Oh, are you better?" And as someone who runs numbers for a living, you're within a range, right? You're never going to be better at every test. You're never going to be worse at every test. But comparable, right, is always the thing you want to say, because you're going to be better at some, worse at others.
Yeah, and I think that's a good part of it. So somebody asked, Kent Luriz and Stenger said, what are the last two dies for in the Threadripper?
Placeholders. If you think about it, it would be a lot of money for us to develop 3 sockets. And if you look at the Threadripper socket already, it's kind of quite a large socket and kind of, I'm guessing expensive socket. I don't actually know the numbers or anything. But by putting those fillers in there, we can use the same, or at least a lot of the same parts as the Epic sockets. So that's what you're seeing essentially is keeping that sizing the same and the pinout the same.
Very cool. Okay. So let me ask this part. When you guys, how long has it been since this has been an idea to where it's fully come to fruition? Because now that everything's out, I don't think it's really much of a big deal of like how long it takes to make it, but more of just kind of figuring out like, because I mean, for a while it was a lot of like talk of people saying, oh, this new Zen chip is coming out, this Zen chip, and Zen, and it just kept going on for a while. And so I always wondered, like, how long was this like an idea and then just really made into one?
I actually love this question. I get this question a lot. And this goes back to, this has nothing to do with AMD. This is purely a question about, semiconductor manufacturing and the process and all that. From design, a big semiconductor like a processor takes about 4 years to become a product. Now, and this comes down to when you're doing the core architectures, right? It's a long process. And so when you make a mistake and you go, oh, we made a guess and things aren't going that way or whatever, it's kind of a hard, long turnaround to fix that. But so that's the reason why at those initial stages, they work so hard to make sure they're kind of what they think is going to be right. So if you think about it, Zen's probably been in production for about 4 years. On the other hand, when you talk about Zen 2, where it's just a, we're going to take this architecture and make it better, not like a full new architecture, that's the sort of thing you're going to try to turn around every, 18 months or 2 years, somewhere in that range, right?
Yeah. Well, see, and I think that's interesting because like even I don't know why they do this test, but I find it interesting is like every time they do like the comparison of your guys' benchmarks with like nitrogen, and they're like trying to freeze it to see how far it goes, and I think it's cool, but I'm always going like, who goes out and buys nitrogen filled coolant and pushes it this far? I mean, like, because an average consumer, you don't see it happen, and putting any kind of nitrogen would freeze most of it anyway.
So actually, I have an answer for that. And I think the answer is Nick or Dave's his name. But we actually have a guy at AMD whose job it is to try to figure out, how much headroom there is. How fast could we make it in an absolute perfect world? And so he spends his life out on our little patio, I guess you'd call it, our little outside quad thing, attempting to make these chips as fast as possible. So you'll find him out there with liquid nitrogen trying to do it. And then we have some customers, and these are kind of really, really rare situations where they're doing like HPC testing and conductor testing and things. And I'll get calls about like, hey, if I wanted to use liquid nitrogen, how would I do it? And normally that's why I have to call that guy. Because, no one else does it on a daily basis, right? But yeah, so there are people out there who are doing it. As a matter of fact, I was watching a thing on a quantum computing company that's pushing it too, as far as like next gen stuff.
Very nice. So we get a question from VoltSpark, says, ask him about the simulations they do for CPUs and GPUs. How accurate are they?
Simulations. Are you talking about like MATLAB and while we're building it?
I think that's what he's probably going for in that.
How accurate are they? Very.
I would hope, sir. I would hope they'd be very accurate.
Let's think about this. I believe, and you know, I'm not looking things up at the moment, but a wave of light is like, you know, a standard wave of light is like 200 nanometers, and we're talking about working in the 14 nanometer range and going down to 7. So if there's any variance, anything's wrong, that's going to come up really, really fast, right? So how accurate are they? Well, accurate enough that we're talking in, you know, 7 nanometer, and it's, you know, turning out right. So.
Okay. Yeah, he said he agreed and said yes. He's like, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I like his response was, yeah, that one. I was like, okay. Now remember, guys, if you're on Facebook Live or you're on, Twitch, you guys can ask any questions as we're going through this, and we will ask Chris. So when you guys have made, with the chips and everything, with Vega, when was this an idea or conception when this came around? Because you guys had, was Ryzen before the, was it Vega, or was Vega coming after it and a kind of like affiliation to everything?
Honestly, that's one I don't have a very good answer for. Really, that would go more towards the RTG, the you know, like the group that does graphics. I help customers with it when it gets out into the field and towards the end, but I don't have much insight into the beginning there, honestly.
Okay. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I always think it's funny when people are like, oh, you work for AMD, so you know everything. I'm like, well, he works for a part of AMD, not the official, like, because you'll get the sales team, there's the reps, social media, and it goes on and on and on. Like, because they're a company, guys, and they're not like one guy running 20 jobs, because God forbid, that would be horrible.
Yeah, and all the time, I'm meeting people like in the same office I've never met before. I'm like, oh, who are you? What do you do here? Hold on.
Do you ever just go to the water cooler and see some cute girls and be like, hey, what's going on?
My wife would not be happy about that. No, that does not happen.
That's true. Okay. Well, then I'll be your wingman for not happening. No, I'm just kidding. So let's get to this point. What is the most typical question that you usually get asked about AMD or about this stuff that you work on?
So lately, I've been getting the same question 4 times a day. So I think I'll address that one since I have people on the phone willing to listen, and maybe they'll get something out of it. Yes, if you buy a Threadripper and you have an AIO cooler and there's an adapter that works for it, it will work, even though it doesn't fit on the whole die. I get this question all day and all night by everyone. It was kind of a joke that we had like these trainings where people are coming in, and I was getting like 5 at a time asking the same question. You know, when it comes to cooling, you have to cool the die on the inside, and then there's kind of, you know, the rest of the space in the packaging. So, you know, that will work. It's okay. Now, there are new solutions that are covering the whole package. But, yeah, so that's a question I get a lot. The other question I get probably every single day is, oh, you work for AMD. Can you get me something?
I know that one. Not for AMD, but for our side.
Sure. And it's like, let's put it this way. Right now, getting a 580, I can't even do. I mean, it's like the hardest thing I've ever. So, you know.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, because, I mean, like, with cryptocurrency and everything going on, a lot of guys have been like, oh, hey, we can get these cards. I mean, but I think it swings into your guys' favor if you think about it, because, like, they could have gone out and bought, like, 1080 Ti's, but instead they went with AMD because they're like, oh, yeah, these cards work, they're good. Like, we could have been doing it on anything else, but at the same time, it sucks for the consumer, because I think at one point everybody was like, oh, we don't got them. They've just been bought out like crazy. You know? Yeah. What did it say?
You know, that's very hard for me, too. Is because I work with the gaming customers. You guys are my customers, right? And so it's hard when there's not a lot you can do. I mean, we're selling out of all of them. And so and it's getting better, right? Supply's getting better, but it's hard whenever there's not something you can do. I would love to just be able to go, yeah, here's a whole stack. Let me get them for you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. So as you say, you work with the gaming side. Let's get to the gamer aspect because we've been talking about this. What game are you currently playing?
I was actually downloading Overwatch while you guys were talking, and me and my son were playing Rocket League all night last night. So I guess those would kind of be the two. Like Overwatch is on the next thing happening, and I've pre-ordered the Wolfenstein 2. So I've got that on pre-order. I'm really looking forward to that. And Quake. I didn't even mention Quake. Yeah, the Quake beta has been pretty much probably my go-to whenever I'm not playing with the kids.
See, like it's really weird for me because like Quake, I love Quake, like the storyline of Quake. I played that every time, and Doom. Like those are like my two favorite to go back to.
Yeah.
And when they made the new Doom, I was really excited by it. And then when they released Quake Champions, I was kind of like, please give me Quake 5. Like, can I get Quake 5? I'd really like Quake because those are my jams. But Quake Arena, or Quake Champions, sorry. I'm sorry. That's how old I am. Like, I was like, Quake Champions. Like, I've just dated myself. Don't quote me, kids. So the thing I think is interesting is that for me, Quake Champions, I was never like, it never went, I went, ooh, Quake Champions. It's weird for me. I don't know why. But I love all the characters. Like, I love Joe. I love most of Bethesda's games, but that game was like one that it just never really got me for some reason.
Yeah. So I am actually the world's worst first-person shooter player. It's kind of a joke in the household that my 6-year-old beats me, and it drives me out of my mind. Yeah, so like if you put me on the one, the actual game where there's a storyline, I can do pretty good. And I'm, pretty happy. But when I play Quake Champions, I'm, tearing a whole team down, right? Because I'm the guy who gets like fragged 60 times in one game.
Are you the guy who gets like the 60 frags and you get like one guy? You're like, yeah, I did something.
Exactly. I literally, my wife came in because she heard me jump up. I'm like, I got someone.
I know that feeling. That's more of me like in PUBG. Like, well, I mean, like I think when I first, like PUBG is my game that I'm playing right now with Escape from Tarkov. That's another game that's not so much on the radar that people are playing, but it was constructed by, I mean, have you heard of Escape from Tarkov?
No.
So this game was designed by some Russian programmers, and it basically highlights I think this is where the post-apocalyptic world's supposed to keep happening, because everybody keeps choosing Russia. But you're in Russia, and they've evacuated the whole entire country and the side and everything. So you're supposed to go in there and scavenge any supplies and make it out alive. The problem is that there's other scavengers, which is AI controlled, or if the player wants to, they become the AI, take that position and hunt you down, where you don't lose supplies or don't gain experience. But if you make it out as a scavenger, you get extra supplies. But if you're like one of the US or bears, as they call them, the special operations form, you loot and then you get the extraction without getting killed. And that loot you can use to trade to get better equipment as you go along. And you're just constantly staying alive and scavenging. And there's like the PvP aspect where players have different weapons and different strats. And it's never just one-sided. But it's really fun. It's like they call it the most hardcore intensive first-person shooter, because once you shot, like any supplies you bring in, if you get shot and downed, that's it. Like you don't get that stuff back. Like you've lost all that supplies that you worked for.
That would be the worst for me.
Would it be the raging moment for you? You'd be like, nope, not even playing this game.
I'm thinking the opposite. I wouldn't even make it long enough to have any decent supplies. I'm that bad. I got into this field for the love of the technology, right? I came up through the HPC department.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really good at that end and that stuff. And then I love gaming, but I'm just not good at it at all.
Gotcha. So when you guys made the Threadripper, let me ask this part. How did you guys come up with because I noticed you guys aren't using pins anymore, or transistors. You guys are basically using just flat-headed connectors, correct?
Yeah, so that is a LGA package, And that is actually not a new thing for AMD. So in this realm, in like the desktop realm, people haven't seen it before. They're used to seeing PGA pin grid arrays from AMD, but we have been doing LGAs for Syber for a long time, and I believe there's actually some embedded parts you can buy that are LGA. And if you think about it, putting the pins, because the pins are there, they're just on the board, right?
Yeah.
So by putting the pins on the board, you kind of have less of a chance of bending a pin, because you don't move the board as much as you would the chip, right?
Yeah.
And so as you get these larger packages, it just makes sense to go LGA.
That makes sense, and I understand that. So here's a question here that says, the dummies fill the gap, even the chip. What if you swap the dummies for 2 real within the processor? Would that be possible? Heat and so forth for a common consumer. That's a wow.
So if you did that, you'd be making an Epic chip. We have a product that does that. It's not it's not something that's not done. You couldn't. I mean, you can't just like open it up and take them out, though. You'd have to build it from the ground up like that. So I'm just assuming he's not saying to do that.
Yeah,
but
I was sitting there going like, that seems like a very tough thing to do. He said okay, and that's totally fine. Did he see the clip on that guy breaking the Threadripper socket on Twitch? What? How did he do that, Volt Sparks? How did he break a? Have you ever seen that? People breaking the sockets on him?
I haven't. Although I will say that the first time I saw that socket, because I get these pre-release things that are from engineering samples, and so they come to us, and they don't come to us with any instructions or any rules or anything. They just kind of give you a board. And I looked at it and went, oh, this is very not what I'm used to, right?
Yeah.
Then I called around, and I called another guy. I'm like, hey, have you done this before? He goes, I actually broke it by tightening it down too much. So I know at least one other person has broke one. I haven't actually seen one break them, but yeah, if you want some advice from me, use that little torque wrench that comes with it, because you can over tighten it. When it clicks, stop.
Makes sense. Somebody said, can you tell us about the HBCC on the Vega? Freaking genius. I think he was complimenting, saying you guys are freaking geniuses. And that's what he was asking. Can you tell us about the ECC?
Can you tell us about ECC?
HBCC on the Vega.
HBCC.
I think. Can you clarify that question a little bit more, Kent? And he
like
says,
sure.
What? Well, Kent put, there was one that D-lined the Threadripper and killed it. I think that was like what we were talking about, of somebody breaking the socket and everything like that. So let's see what Twitch is saying. High bandwidth cache control. That's what he's talking about.
Oh, honestly, like I said, Vega comes kind of through a different department. I help people on the back end, but I don't know that much. Sorry.
All right, that's no problem, man. Like I said, everyone expects like every question in the world to be answered, because it's like you brand it. You're like, oh, I'm this. Somebody's going to expect you to answer every question in the world. And I try to tell people all the time, guys, just because somebody works at a company, they're not going to have every single question. They'll know quite a lot, but it doesn't mean they're going to have every single one, because there's a lot of things that come out. Even for our own R&D team, they have lots of stuff that come through, and then we have to go back and ask questions, and then we have to figure out. Because when we send PC out to you guys, we don't want you guys to get a PC that's dead or have issues, and that's why with our partners, we make sure to keep clear communication. It's one of those things where you can have lots of questions, but it doesn't mean that every single one's getting answered. So I do apologize if we're not giving everyone 100% answers on it, guys, because again, like I said, even me, I'm human, flawed, don't know everything at CyberPower, because I'm one part of the departments out of many that we have, and the same thing goes for Chris, So, but that is a good question, and that's something we can definitely check out and look into in the future, guys, and see if we can have a discussion about that. Here's the Twitch clip of that guy breaking the Threadripper. All right, we'll open that. Let's see here. Apparently, it's on Yogcast. That's what it was. Well, I won't say anything. I was like, there's an exception to that one, and I know why that happened. So with that said, when you guys, why won't you just go away? Now I can't even look at anything. This is great. I'm trying to look. The thing is, somebody texts me, says, get off your phone. I was like, I wrote them back going like, this is my only way to look at chat because I can't, there's no monitor sitting behind here saying like, so-and-so read this. And hopefully one day we'll get it, guys, but we don't. So is there any kind of things that we should expect in the future for the Ryzen itself? Is this an ongoing, chip architecture that you guys will just keep improving with a new generation? Or is this just like one part and you guys have more bigger projects coming down the line?
No, Zen is the architecture for a while. What we have is we have Zen 2 coming out. I love saying this, and I heard one of our higher ups, I think again it was Lisa, say that Zen 2 is real. It's a thing. We're already working on it. It's already something we're developing. And so that's on its way, and that's going to be the Zen 2 architecture, which will move, all of the stuff you see today is going to, of course, get that new core. What else? We have, it was released already, so I can say we have at least one more Threadripper coming out, the 1900. There's a lot of good stuff coming, so.
That's good to hear. I'm glad that kind of thing is actually something that you guys are thinking about, because sometimes people will sit and stew over stuff, and like for me, I think it's kind of good that you guys are being this productive. I mean, because you guys were already productive like this with the FX series, and then you were just like, hey, we need a new architect. And do you mind if I ask, like, how do people come up with these new these archetypes for each kind of chip?
I wasn't in the meetings to do it, but from what I know, it's lots and lots of long hours in a room deciding what needs to be in it. For example, something like SMT, or what our competitor calls hyperthreading, we had for a long time as far as the technology to do it, but then you have to sit down on paper and say, okay, this is something we need in this chip, and then you put it in, on that next iteration. So yeah, it's really a process of sitting down and defining the customer's needs. And like I said before, most of that comes from what we hear from you, what we hear from customers. We are a company that listens.
No, I'd have to agree with you, because I mean, a lot of this stuff is very attentive. I mean, even for me, like when I stream or use my PC, again, it's the Ryzen 1800 that you guys have, and I never really have an issue. Like I never sit there and go like, oh man, this is a bad choice. Let me ask this part. With everything that you guys have for chips, I know that you guys tend to have a little more heat coming off your chips a little bit more. Do you mind if I ask, like, what has that always been about? Like, because I know it's not just like this one isolated. It's like, is it because you guys are giving a lot of power to it and pushing it, or like what? How does that happen? Like, because I don't understand that part of it.
So, well, let's talk about that. So we say always, but the Ryzen series only goes from 65 watt TDP up to a 95 watt TDP. So those are actually pretty low. And if you look at the individual core on Zen, the per core watt usage, or TDP, so thermal power, is pretty low. And so the heat dissipation there is actually what isn't bad, and I don't know that that's a thing. Now, any chip generation, as it starts to be there longer, you try to get as much as you can out of it. So you're going to up the thermals and up the cooling and up all that to try push as much as you can out of it. Again, though, you look at something like even Threadripper, that's 16 cores at 180 watts. That's actually not very high, because when you look at server chips that are 16 cores, I mean, you're looking at 220, 240, those numbers.
Wasn't it the same, the heat itself was running the same as like your other FX series? Like, because that's still pretty low, what you're saying. Like, because you've upped the processor speed and everything on it, but you're still running almost at the same amount. So I mean, that's the thing of where I'm saying, like, for me, when I had it, and maybe it's just where I live, because I do live in California, and it's not really the best weather at times when it gets humid and is a little bit hot. So I always think to myself, like, going, like, I go, maybe it's just where I'm at and that kind of thing happening. But when I've had your guys' chips and used them, I've always seemed to have that, like, the heat kind of thing. And maybe it's just because the build of how I had it. Because I noticed, like, with certain ones, I've always had to go with water cooling. Now, in your Ryzen series, you guys can use the Wraith right now. But with Threadrippers, is it required that you need the liquid cooling, or is that just something you can still use with fans and never have an issue?
So I think we're telling people that you really should go water cooling, and I think it might be said that water cooling is mandatory. Is kind of one of those things that they're saying just for people. On the other hand, it is 180 watt TDP. So if you get a very good air-cooled solution that meets that thermal headroom, it should be fine. And it does work, and it's not a problem. Noctua has one coming out. I don't know if it's released yet or not, but I have seen it. And that easily meets 180 watt TDP. And then the other thing is, if you look at the server line in Epic, those aren't water-cooled, right? Yes. So it's doable. But I do think for most customers today, even the cost of getting something that's at that level is the same as getting an AIO, right?
Yeah. They're saying, ask them if they got any Ruby stuff for AMD, mouse mats, action figures, and stuff like that. Well, I guess that just came out really fast.
Trying to see if I can pull that up. Okay, I can't pull that up right now. But I do actually have some cool Ruby backgrounds and Ruby pictures. And I don't know if you're looking around my room right now. I'm building a build to actually go into a show. And I'm hoping to have Ruby on there too. So, yeah, very excited for Ruby.
Okay, so
I don't know if we're actually getting any swag yet, but I'm sure it will come.
So let me ask this part too, and this is one thing I was reading more of an article. So a lot of graphics cards today are eliminating Crossfire or what is it? As NVIDIA has theirs, their cross between the two. And I'm wondering with you guys, is it the same idea that having a single card solution is the better route for you guys because not everyone can afford the second? And are you guys going to eliminate Crossfire, or is Crossfire going to still stick around even when people have Vega?
Crossfire is definitely still a thing. And I'll give you the stipulation. As of today, Crossfire support isn't enabled in Vega. But on release 17.3 of the driver, you are going to get Crossfire back, and that should be slated out in the next couple of weeks. It's in September sometime, I believe. So, that will give you your two-way Crossfire. And hopefully you can go even to three-way down the road. So these are things that we are looking at and are coming for Vega. But on the other hand, statistically, it's not actually used all that much. And part of that is because not many people can afford it, and it's very expensive to add two graphics cards, right? Because graphics cards can be one of the most expensive parts of your machine. And then on the other hand, it's because a lot of gamers, knowing that, because since people don't have it, a lot of game developers aren't adding in support either. So, do I think there's an industry trend away from it? I do, and I think our company kind of does. I think that was a little said. On the other hand, we're still going to support it, and with the right application, it can be amazing. The example I'm going to give are my professional cards. It's actually getting more prevalent in professional cards to start using Crossfire and using multiple GPUs and kind of really using that raw compute power. So, it's going to stick around, right? Mm-hmm. But, I think it's going to come down to the application, whether the customers need it. And that's like what I was saying about being reactive to the customers. This is another way. We're not saying I think what the industry trend will be. We're listening to where we think it's going to go and what we're hearing from developers and customers and seeing what people are really buying. I'm sure you and me and some of these other guys, we're the ones who buy the top of the line no matter what. I had a Threadripper on pre-order that day, first day.
You guys were killing me. I bought the Ryzen going, yes, this will be it. And then it's like the Threadripper. I was like, no, why AMD? I would have bought that. Like,
to be honest with you, I did the exact same thing. I built that machine about 3 weeks before Threadripper came out, and that was going to be my primary machine. And then, or actually, it was a little more than that. It was 3 weeks before I found out what the release date was. So probably maybe about 2 months ago. And then, yeah, right after it, they told me about Threadripper and the release date, and I was like, oh, what? I wish I would have known. So,
it is a curse, and I think a lot of people thought the same thing. But to be honest, I'm actually happy with what I have, because I mean, like, as much as we like to future-proof stuff, because I'm the same way, where I'll like go out and buy the top end of something, or at least get as close as possible within budget range. You know, it works well for me. And to be honest, I was looking at some of the stuff for the Threadripper, and granted, even though I have the top Ryzen of the series that I have, the Epic itself still has a little, like, it's just basically double of what we're looking at right now. You know, which is fine. I mean, like, because for me, I'm a very intensive user, so I tend to use stuff like Adobe a lot. So I use stuff from After Effects and processing, videos and coding and all that fun stuff, and then also doing streaming. So I use it for a lot, and even for what it is right now, I still think it does really well. I mean, like, I can't say that I do like the high-end blacks and reds cameras, video processing through it, but I've had friends talk to me about it and, say like, yeah, we've used it and it works fine. And I think that's the great part, because the diversity between the two of just not gaming, but also for the users that are using it, is great. Because in the past, like I said, you guys have been through a lot of my video editing with the chips that I have. So you guys have definitely given great quality behind the products that you have. So I always think it's weird when I get people like, oh, just go Intel. You're like, oh, why? They've never failed me. I've never had an issue. Like, I think I've had one Intel chip go black on me. And like, I mean, that's my personal experience. I'm not saying they do it to everyone, guys. Like, everything happens. It's a digital world. I've had hard drives I bought brand new die out on me. So, but I think it's great, because the products that you guys have are not just like some shoddy kind of like, oh yeah, offset brand, and they're hoping to make their leg up. It's like you guys came out the gates designing a lot of this stuff that are great quality products.
There are only two companies in the world that do what we do, right? In both regards, actually, it's like us and NVIDIA and us and Intel. Honestly, I like to think we have a pretty good relationship with both of them. I don't know if you saw, even NVIDIA was posting the bell boxes for the processor.
Yeah.
And
that was the interesting. Sorry, finish what you were to say.
Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, that's what I was thinking about too. I was like, NVIDIA's like been like the juggernaut of like GPUs as it goes. I've always wondered to myself, like, did they ever think about to themselves going like, we're going to venture into what these guys are doing? We're going to make our own processor. And that's always something that I find interesting, where it's like, are they going to make their own, or are they just, because they're not a small force. They're a huge, conglomerate as like their cards and stuff. And alone, they've been able to survive off of it because it's used quite a lot, as much as the CPU.
I have no idea what they're going to do. I will say it's a small industry, and so we normally kind of at least know people at the other companies. Mm-hmm. Have friends there, people you worked with in the past, or this, that, and the other. So it will, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm definitely excited, at least for what we have. It's going to be a fun next couple of years at least.
That I'm looking forward to, and hearing all that. So let's check real quick, because it is getting time to that period. Let's see what we got here. Have we got any? Let's see what we got here. Do we have any final requests or questions? We'll look into here. All right, Threadripper and mineral oil liquid cooling. Okay, so that person is, they are thermally ecstatic about it. They're very happy with what you got. Will SRIOV be coming on Vega 5664? Oh, I don't really want Crossfire, but I do want SRIOV on consumer cards. I was hoping that Vega 5664 would have it. Allows you to hardware to virtualize Vega.
I honestly don't know. I know that's normally a professional card thing. I don't know if that's slated for the future of the Vega cards.
Okay. All right. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Chris, thank you for being a guest on here. We greatly appreciate it and answering the questions. And guys, if you guys haven't checked out anything from AMD, go to the website, guys. They have a lot of great products just besides just CPUs. They got a lot of other cool stuff. And the community is very supportive, guys. You guys have the red, I think it's the red plus, or is it, I can't remember what the community, it's like, I know there's the red, and I think there's the red plus is like for influencers, isn't it?
I'm still for influencers?
Yeah, like
Team Red.
Yeah, like, there it is. See, I'm horrible. You know, like I'm sitting here going like, there is the red plus, if I'm right. Like, so, but guys, thanks, Chris and Cybergear. This is coming from Volt Sparks. He says, "Thank you. Thank you for answering our questions. We greatly appreciate it."
Thank you.
So as far as everything goes, guys, like I said, check out their website. We greatly appreciate you guys for being here for Cyber Insider. I'm glad that we got to sit down and have this discussion, folks, because a lot of people were always asking questions and kind of, figure out what they wanted to, ask. And it's kind of funny when the time finally comes, everyone was like, "Oh, we don't have any questions." Like, now you don't have questions? We have an official and you don't have questions. So, but thank you, Chris, for coming on. Thank you for everybody at AMD for being supportive and helpful. And guys, we will be back next Friday from 4 p.m. Pacific Coast time, doing what we usually do, bringing you the greatest part of talking about the internet and the web and hardware and games. So guys, thank you for stopping by. And as we usually like to say, thanks for stopping by.